Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, or morning, or evening for those of you joining us from another time zone. I'm Lindsay, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar that's called CK12 for Math Teachers. Now, we have lots to cover today, but before we get into the core content, I want to go over a few logistics about the Zoom webinar platform. You should see two different options on your Zoom screen. One is for Q&A and one is for chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK12, please post it in the Q&A window. Our presenter will pause for a Q&A session after each major topic to address any questions that have been submitted. The chat window is a place for a community conversation. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, feel free to share your state or country, your district, and subject you teach. I think today is the emphasis is obviously on math, so we'd love to know what specific area of math you focus on at your school. Just make sure that when you're using the chat window, you're sending any general posts to everyone and not just to the CK12 panelists, so everybody can see your comments. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, other than, sorry, my allergy voice of, an occasional cough or sneeze for me, if you're having any trouble with your video or your sound, let us know in the Q&A or the chat window. Now that we've gone over a few logistics for the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. So we're going to launch a poll here in a second that should be appearing on your screen that's asking you a couple of questions. So if you could take a second and answer these, it's going to help us kind of cater this webinar toward your needs. So this first question that you see is about how long you've been using CK12, whether you're brand new to the site, less than a year, 1 year, 2 years, so on and so forth. Then the second question is asking which parts of our site that you've used frequently, which ones are you familiar with? And note that you can choose all that apply on that second question. So check any of them that you're familiar with. Let me give you guys a few seconds to tackle those questions. Looks like we're progressing here. About half of you have submitted. Okay, we're going to shut it down in about 5 more seconds here. Great, thank you very much for that feedback. Our team's going to review these questions and help direct the conversation. So let me introduce you to our other presenter, Katie, and she's going to talk to you more about what to expect from today's webinar.
Thank you, Lindsay. So beyond finding out about you, we thought this might be a good time to pause and let you think about what you're hoping to get out of this webinar. So take a minute to determine the following 2 things. So the first one is what you hope to get out of today's webinar. So you're welcome to post this in the chat window if you feel comfortable. We'll see if we can address these areas as we go, or just kind of keep it in mind throughout this next hour webinar. The second is a question you have about CK12 or what's offered. So I'm betting you already have plenty of questions about CK12, and you are more than welcome to start using that Q&A window at any time, or you're welcome to save them kind of throughout the course of this webinar and ask us as we go through each various section.
Okay, so why don't we make sure that everybody is familiar with the CK12 Foundation and our mission. So the CK12 Foundation was founded in 2007, and we're a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to improving student learning by increasing access to educational materials through the FlexBook platform and concept-based modalities. CK12 offers free, high-quality, standards-aligned, open content through an integrated set of tools for learning, including digital textbooks, concept-based learning resources, simulations, interactive practice, and more. And the best part is that we give it all away for free. Our core content and curriculum is for middle school and high school math and science, with some K-5 math practice and videos. However, with the addition of donated resources and user-created content, You'll also be able to find books for other subjects and levels, especially related to social studies and to English. Like I just said, CK12 was founded in January 2017, or sorry, January 2007. So 10 years later now in 2017, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. If you've been on our site lately, you've probably seen these fireworks making this announcement. We're collecting messages from our users to feature on CK12. So if you haven't done that, feel free at some point to send us a message, or if you're working with students, it'd be awesome if they took the time to fill this out and give us a little feedback as well. We're really excited about this being our 10th anniversary year. And then one last note before I turn over the presentation. People are often curious about our location and our team. And believe it or not, CK12 is run by a small team of about 35 people in Palo Alto, California, with a few colleagues working outside of California in our India office. We're all here because we love what we do, and we're excited to give people all over the world access to free, quality content and resources. So with that, let's start exploring what CK12 has for our math educators. Katie, all yours.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that introduction to CK12, and thanks again to everyone who's joined us today. So specifically during this webinar for math teachers, I'll be covering the following topics with a focus on our math tools and different content areas. So the first is concept-based learning and FlexBooks. So concept-based learning is bite-sized chunks of content supported with various modalities, and one of those modalities includes core content in text format that we have in full textbooks for math across middle school and high school. The next that we'll cover is customizing content, so taking all of those resources and tailoring them to meet your needs, whether starting from CK12's content or from content that other users have already started customizing. And then the last part is assignments within CK12 groups. So creating and customizing assignments, seeing student progress, and how that integrates with learning management systems. So if you're going to CK12, now this is the student version of the page, so if you're signed in as a teacher, you might see a slightly different version, but mainly the study guides is the change on this front page. So you'll find this whole educational platform provides standard aligned resources primarily for STEM, and these can be accessed anytime, anywhere, and on any device for free. As you can see, there's a ton of resources here, so often the question is where to start. So the first place of this is understanding what we offer. So in this larger concept-based learning area, we have different modalities. So we enrich every concept with these modalities to help meet students' needs in the best way possible as they try to learn. So the core modalities include text, you'll find in our reads, simulations, we have 120 plus physics and chemistry sims, interactive PLICs, so we have over 1,000 math and science PLICs, videos, practice, and real-world applications. So kind of figuring out where these are and which ones to use, I often start talking to educators by asking them what their goal is. And that's really the easiest way to kind of frame any action you have on CK12. So the first thing that you might find is a teacher who's looking for a single resource or a topic. They're teaching class tomorrow or maybe even in 2 class periods, and they're just looking to kind of enhance their learning in order to see what that looks like. So examples of that are maybe finding a PLIX to explore angles, looking at a read on integration, a real world application, or what we call RWA on scale models, or just a video for learning time to kind of supplement their class. The next way someone might have for kind of approaching CK12 is a goal of exploring a branch to create a whole unit. So maybe they're creating a unit on decimals and they want to use different concepts and put them together to create a unit. Beyond that, you could use a FlexBook as your full curriculum. So for example, an Algebra 1 concept collection, or kind of building a FlexBook yourself as you customize it for a particular class that you're working on. And then the last thing is teachers that are looking for standards aligned content. So whether that's through our Common Core State browser or looking through state standards aligned content. So each one of these areas kind of allows you to approach and use our site in a different way. And so I think we'll kind of go from there and switch over and start exploring our site live. So let me go ahead and pull up our homepage. And we can go from there. So the first thing in here was that first goal of searching for content. So if it's just a quick concept that you're looking for, you're welcome to use our search bar, which you'll find up in the top right here. So let's say I was teaching something on right triangles. I could type in right triangle. And then you'll see a number of different options. You'll see the content that CK12 has. You'll also see a community contributed tab. So any content that a user has created and republished to our site is in that tab, but we'll just kind of stick to CK12 for today. So you'll see there's some videos, there's some reads. On the left-hand side, I could filter by category. So maybe I just want full concepts. And this first concept might be a great place to start. So right triangles, bearings, and other applications. Now, in this particular concept, you'll see some featured options. So you'll see a read, video, some practice, a clicks. You'll notice those are kind of our core modalities that we're talking about. And you might have seen kind of in any of our math reads, you'll see a similar structure for anything that's incorporated into a FlexBook. So you'll see kind of an introduction. As you scroll through it, there might be some embedded videos. You'll see different example problems floating through. And then at the end of our core content, you'll see review questions. And so that's a standard page. Some of them might be longer if they're from our original FlexBooks, or shorter if they're from a concept, but that is your core text content. If we went back to the top here, you can see that these other modalities are showing up already. So I don't even need to go back to that concept page to see them. So videos, you can probably guess. Assessment and practice, we're going to talk about later. But let's take a minute to look at our Plix, because that's a tool that you might not have seen before. So if I click on this Plix, Plix stands for Play, Learn, Interact, and Explore. And they're really a chance for students to work through content and really understand how things work together. And every Plix on our site has 3 components. So it has this introduction, it has a description, and it tells you how to interact with this. So I can change this, move that around, and interact with this idea of angles and bearing and how that works. I can then ask or answer some questions, and you'll see a mix of questions. Now, if I got it wrong, because this isn't an assessment tool, it really allows students to see the answer that you're working with and then continue on from there. And you'll see a mix of different questions, in this case, kind of open response questions or multiple choice questions. And as you progress through, it should address higher levels of thinking and maybe even an open discussion question at the end of that. You'll see in the top right here a chance to assign to class. And once again, we'll talk about assignments in the third part of this webinar. So this might be a good chance to talk about a strategy for teaching in a math class. So this is our Plix, and I know kind of 2 different ways that we can talk about using a Plix that a lot of teachers have used. One is as an introduction or warm-up to a concept or lesson. So you could do this as, hey, I'm starting this lesson, I'm looking at this, maybe have students explore, and then you can talk about, well, what were you seeing? What areas do we need to talk about? How does that work? And whether you use it as a warm-up or maybe even an exit slip. So as you're exiting, say, take the last few minutes, explore this, write down one idea about this concept based on the Plix and hand it in. Similarly, you could have students journal about this. So often if we continued through and we were just typing in answers here, submitting it, you might see correct pieces. The very last one in here would be an open discussion question, and they could answer that in a journal for their class, in Q&A within a group, or on our CK12 forums that we're going to talk about later on.
Katie, let me pause you there for a second. Just a few reminders of, we are going to be typing out the teaching strategies as Katie's listing them. So you can see that in the chat window. Our team's just typing them out so you can, you know, kind of let that resonate a little bit as you're reading it. Also, this is awesome. There's so many of you guys from all across the country and even different countries. A reminder that in the chat window, go ahead and send your message to everybody if you're okay with that. Some of you are typing to all panelists, and so not everybody in the group was able to see that. And then also, as Katie is delivering this content and doing a walkthrough of these tools, anytime you have a question that you're gonna want her to answer here in a few minutes when she breaks for a full Q&A, type it in the Q&A window. That's the best way to make sure that your question is gonna get answered by Katie when she's finished with a section. Okay, so hopefully we'll start to populate that Q&A window soon. So Katie, back to you. Why don't you go ahead and resume?
Great. I also noticed that someone said there was a question on the mobile version. If you're talking about the mobile version of practice, go ahead and put that in Q&A, as Lindsay said. If you're talking about the mobile version of this, webinar, please, give us any feedback about pieces that aren't working. You might also try to log in via a computer if you're having difficulty seeing any part of this webinar through a phone. But yeah, so let me go back to kind of talking about browsing and going from there. Anytime you're on our site, you can always click on CK12, and that will get you back to our homepage. So that's a good thing to know in terms of navigation. But we were in that right triangle concept. Another area that you could kind of look at and going through core modalities, you could look at those clicks through this homepage and through browse, and you'll see that it will load kind of the clicks for different areas based on the branches you have chosen. And I want to take 1 second to talk about simulations. And I know this is a math webinar, but I taught pre-calculus, and some of these simulations, such as this one that has to do with projectile motion, might be fantastic for something like a pre-calculus class where you're doing applications of different concepts. And so just to see kind of the difference between our simulations and our clicks, our sims start with a question, they can advance kind of through a process, and then they have, instead of one thing that you're manipulating, really a system of pieces that work together. So in this case, launch speed, height, etc. So just like the clicks, there are questions that go with this. I can click on any of these questions. It will jump me back, and I can actually try out the questions by kind of setting different components and then submitting them. And then the last piece, once again, we really want to focus on that question of how do things apply. So the last part of any simulation has these different explore pieces where you can talk about applications of that concept beyond the particular simulation. So once again, clicks are those quick little interactives, and simulations have a broader area and are more in depth as a system. But I think both can be used in a math class when they fit in order to do warm-ups or explorations or anything like that.
Katie, and the simulations work on Chromebooks. So talk to them about how they can access these, please.
Sure. So all of our stuff works across devices with the one limitation for Plix and Sims on screen size. So you can actually use anything using a web browser. I worked off a Chromebook for the entire first year that I worked here. So clearly you can use any of our content on Chromebooks, on Macs, on PCs, anything like that. If you're looking to use simulations and Plix on a tablet, the Plix are optimized for a 9-inch screen size or larger, and Sims should work on anything larger than 7 inches. So those are the couple things that don't necessarily work on a phone just because the phone screen size is too small. But other than that, our content should work across mobile devices, tablets, and various computers or Chromebooks. So hopefully that answered that particular question. And so kind of looking at all of these different modalities, if I go back to, let's say, a bearings page, so we're going to go back out of here and then to CK12, I could pick any of those concepts. And really talking about all of these different modalities, one teaching strategy that you might have is have each student review a different modality for a particular concept. So you saw the read and a video and a Plix, and then create their own set of notes, and then maybe put those together to come up with a class set of notes for that particular topic. So that's one option for a math class that might be useful as you go through. So hopefully you've seen kind of the modalities that you might not have been familiar with, whether you're browsing through here or you're going through the concept page as I showed you. So the next way of approaching content is the idea of building a unit. So building a series of concepts together. So in that case, I might consider scrolling down. Now, if you've been on our site already and you've picked subjects, you might see your subjects here. Now, because I demo, I have a ton of math and science concepts. Or if not, you might just see kind of our general overview of subject areas. So if I was going to pick this one, let's say I was building a unit on measurement when I was teaching. So here, you'll see all of our concepts. So what we did is we said, here are the larger concepts in measurement, and if we broke those down into smaller skills, what do those look like? And then those are the different concepts on our pages. And so in this case, maybe I'm going to build something on metric units, so equivalent metric units and conversions. So I could pick equivalent metric units of length. And then once again, it would take me to that concept page that you now hopefully are starting to become familiar with the different areas here. You'll notice there's a video here, but maybe not in the content. So you're always welcome to filter, and you can see kind of the other resources that are at different levels. So in this case, this video, it was tagged as basic, so it might be a good supplement to kind of help students who are struggling. So I can go through that area. I can pick different components, and I can then say, okay, I'm going to use some things from here. And then if I go back to the measurement browse, go back one more, I can say, let's use that, and then the next concept and the next concept, and kind of build a unit together.
So Katie, we have a question from, looks like an elementary teacher asking about what content might be relevant for grades 3 through 5. So maybe you want to talk about kind of how we structure our content with these concepts, and then what might be relevant to the younger grade levels.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I would say anything in measurement and arithmetic might be areas that you are going to kind of see within the course of an elementary class. You could also look, if you go back to this math browse page as a whole. So, and you can see it this way, or if I went to the home page and I went down to concepts at the bottom, you'll see the subjects area. There's a grade 1 through 5 option. And so we have full curriculum, so full FlexBooks for middle school and high school math and science, but at the lower grades, we still have practice and we still have videos. So let's say, for example, looking at a clock and telling the time, you might see a video here and some assessment. I think this particular concept also shows up, the idea of that shows up in grade 4. And so if I click on that here, we actually also tagged a Plix to this concept, so you'll see kind of an interactive there. So you might see different pieces within that context. In algebra, there's also one book on algebra explorations for grades, I think it's grade 1 through 7. So that might be a resource for you as well. So definitely kind of full curriculum at the middle school, high school level, and then you'll see some resources there. And when we get to talking about user-generated content, that's another place to look for resources for elementary level. And whether you're looking on the whole concept page or within any concept, you might start seeing this concept map up here. So if I click on that, this is a great resource to kind of say, okay, how do these concepts connect together? You'll see some potential suggestions, or I could type in a concept like scientific notation. And you'll see related resources. So whether that's for math and science, I could filter and just do math if I wanted. But this might be a great strategy to work with a colleague and kind of build resources and a class that overlaps both math and science classes. So I can go back to that math and science. It's related to CK12 concepts. So anytime I want to click on one of these, I could see some resources that go there. I could click learn more and go to that concept page. And I can even expand this by clicking on any idea within there and going beyond that to kind of map out whether I'm working within the world of math or whether I want to work interdisciplinary with math and science. So that's a great resource to work with. One other strategy for this area where you're trying to build out that unit is the idea of having students each pick a concept. So if we went back to that measurement idea, we can see it from the homepage here. And I really said, okay, I want to create a unit and then have students create a review. Maybe I could have a student create a video for units of capacity, a couple do length, a couple do mass, and then use those videos together to create a review packet for the students. And that way they've created their own review as they work their way through. So first two covered, looking for a particular resource for a class that's coming up, kind of building a unit. The next one is looking at full curriculum. And so you'll see here this FlexBooks textbooks tab. And let's actually go back to math and pick another area just so you guys see kind of the wide variety of resources. So if I went to algebra, for example, once again, I see all of the concepts that link to my concept pages. And then I can click on that FlexBooks tab. And in algebra, those concepts really cover both middle school and high school. So you might want to go from middle school and click over to high school to see the different books that are available there. You can also see books if you scroll down to the bottom, any of our concept collections in math that have been translated to Spanish. So that might be a useful resource. And then you can actually filter and say, I just want the AC grade or advanced or basic ones. And one note, you'll see here, Algebra 1 Concepts, Algebra 1 Second Edition, or the same thing with Algebra 2. If you looked at the table of contents for any of these books, for any chapter, the concepts version is going to have more sections within that chapter. So really, we took kind of more of a traditional lesson that had multiple components and skills in it, and we broke it up for those concepts. So just know that as you're going back and forth, they share similar content, but the concept collections are broken down more, and those have the matching resources that go with them. Another way to look at books, if you're say, hey, I like these books, but maybe I want one that's more tailored directly for my course or my class. If I'm on the homepage, beyond the community contributed for search, we have on the teacher version this schools icon. And if I click on the schools icon, I can then go from here and say I'm teaching in Texas. So I can click on Texas, and I can see other schools in the area that might be teaching similar concepts, similar sections, or that have done the work to actually customize it specifically to hit Texas standards. So if I scroll down here, here's a great example, El Paso Independent School District. They've done a ton of work redoing curriculum. So they started with a lot of our content and then customized it to fit their local standards and include content for their area. And this is a great case for your colleagues who might not be teaching math and might not have as many resources. You'll notice they've actually started creating some English books as well. And so you might be able to see different areas and concepts and branches that aren't covered based on our standard STEM content. So kind of two scenarios that might be helpful for strategies. The first is to browse the schools page and see how different schools have created stuff, or maybe there's a school district right down the street from you that you want to connect with, and you can contact them and say, hey, it looks like you guys are doing curriculum work. Maybe we could work with you. Maybe we can start with your book. And all of these books that are republished on our site are licensed under our same license. So you're still welcome to start from there and customize it. One last strategy about using our books, CK12 is a highlighting tool. So if I actually opened up any of these books, we'll pick the pre-calc book from EPISD, and I went into a section, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see the highlighting tool via this thing, but if I clicked on one, let's see if it works, and you guys can see it. So if I'm going in here, I could highlight this, and it will often pop up the option to highlight a note take from there. And that's a great way to have students maybe color code formulas or key ideas or something like that. So that's something that you're definitely going to want to explore within our content.
Katie, we had one of our participants ask about aligning to standards. Maybe that's an area you want to discuss about how to browse our standards for content that's relevant to them.
Great, so that's actually that fourth part that we were talking about in this first section. And so there's two ways to do this. So when you're logged in as a teacher, oh, the note just came up. So when you're logged in as a teacher, the first option is to browse our standards browser. So this would be great for concepts. So if you're looking at standards for Common Core, this is an option to start. I could then pick, let's say, high school geometry standards. And you'll see for any given standard in there, we've actually tagged and correlated our CK12 concepts. So here, this is a standard for Common Core that has to do with symmetry. And if I click on the reflection symmetry, it will bring me to that concept page, and you'll see all of the resources that are related to that. So whether that's a read, the Plix, video, those other modalities, and maybe even some study aids for students as well. So that's one option for finding standards. The other option, also still on that homepage for teachers, is this option to find a standards-aligned FlexBook textbook. So let's say I'm in the District of Columbia and I'm teaching algebra. I could then pick a grade level, and it will pull up some books that might include content for that grade that are related to those standards. So in this case, you'll see an algebra book, as well as a physical science concept book that might have some of those concepts mixed in there that would overlap as an extra resource. Now, if you find for mathematics in particular that you're not finding for your state the option for maybe all of these, you could definitely choose the Common Core standards, and then you'll see all of the different branches of mathematics that you could pick from, and then the grades that match, and that will help you kind of see some different books that are tagged to those standards. So those are the different ways that you kind of go through that.
A couple of follow-up questions to what you just said. We had a question about CK12 content tagged for NGSS.
Yes. So if you go through here, you could also look, let's go back to that homepage for a second and let's see if we can get out of that. The NGSS content, so for those that are teaching both math and science, the next generation science standards are tagged the same way the math ones are. So we have your standards and then the concepts that relate to that. And then if you went back to the homepage, you could search based on the science standards as well. So I could pick more standards here, and you'll see the second option is your NGSS standards. And then if you went into any particular state, you then see kind of the different areas in math and science that you could look for books for.
Another question based on what you just said, asking about the highlighting. Are those highlights, are they saved with students in that book forever?
Yeah, so highlighting happens within that account. So if I'm logged in this case, I'm logged in as the Jumpstart demo account, any highlighting that I have will then show up within that book. It's tagged to that account. If I highlight a book, on the site, clearly no one else can see that, but I can definitely see the highlighting that I'm working on and the notes that I've taken. So if you explore that tool, you'll see both the option to color code and highlight, as well as add some notes for those highlights.
Great. So the other questions that are in our Q&A right now, one is about adaptive practice, which we're going to get to here in a minute. We've got another one that is about asking about copyright and restrictions, and that's coming up in about 5 minutes. We had a question about integration with LMS, and that is something that we're going to talk about here. And then kind of an observation, a lot of people posting that they didn't know about us, and that that CK12 is like some other websites but on steroids. So anyway, we appreciate all these comments. Yes, we are proud of our offerings, and also proud that it's all free. So we probably can't state that enough, that everything we're showing you today you can access for free. We just ask that you sign in and have your students sign in so that you can use our site to the full capability. So anyway, so a few of you who are still in Q&A, we're going to be touching on your comments coming up, but I'm going to take back over the screen here because I want to show you a short video of a teacher I met last week in El Paso School District, the one that Katie was just talking about. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Here we go. So this next video, this is a teacher named Jonathan Waters, and he teaches algebra at Chapin High School in El Paso, Texas. And we had a long interview, and he's obviously an awesome dynamic teacher. But this is the part where he's talking about Plix that I thought might be beneficial to you all.
I find a lot of days in math, especially kids want to know why. Like, why are you learning something? Why does this matter to me? Why is this important? When am I going to use this? And a lot of times the Plixes are kind of geared to real world applications. And so, even a Plix like today, which is more like algebra tile based, it's interactive. So the kids are able to see, okay, this is how this works in this particular concept. We've used Plixes that deal with slope. So when you introduce a lesson about slope, you're talking about, different slopes in real life, roller coasters, houses, stuff like that. And a couple of the Plixes, one has one where you're measuring slopes of a roof, another one was with a mountain. And so the kids kind of see in real time what a real world application of it would be. So it's a really good tool.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that. So now that you guys have kind of seen the resources that our site offers for you guys to use in your math class, let's talk about how you might customize that further, just like some of those school districts like El Paso and others have done. So in order to do that, we're going to go through 3 topics. The first is our license, so our CC BY-NC licensing. The second is the heart of our customization, namely FlexBooks and what you can do with them. And the third is more about how content that you and other users create and customize and how that appears on our site. And so we've kind of talked about that a bit, but we'll refresh that as we go through.
Okay, but again, I want to show just a really quick soundbite of, we've been talking to so many people all over the country, and this is Dan Lawson, who's the superintendent of Tullahoma City Schools. And I love what he says here about buying relevancy with the students through customization. This is really, CK12 is different from just a static digital textbook. It is a living thing that you guys can edit and customize for your needs. And so I think he taps into that here.
Yeah, as we think about customizable content, certainly the important is not so it'll simply look like our community, but it's a tool that we use to buy relevance with our kids. As we think about a textbook that is created for Texas or Ohio or California or New York, It doesn't have a place, it doesn't have a person, it doesn't have a thing that connects with our community. In using the CK12 template and using the CK12 content, we have the ability to upgrade, update, and customize every math problem, every science experiment with people, places, and things that our students know and understand. We buy relevance that can't be purchased in textbooks.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that. So talking about that relevance and how that works and kind of what you're allowed to do on our site, I want to start by talking about our Commons license. So note that you have the option to adapt and reshare our content on our site because it's licensed under Creative Commons CC BY-NC licensing. Basically, that means you have to give attribution and you can't use it for commercial purposes. But to find out more specifics, you're welcome to check out our site, figure out kind of the terms and use, as well as check Creative Commons for making sure that you're giving appropriate credit and you're pulling resources that fit under this license. So with that, let's talk about exploring our content and customizing it. So to do that, I'm gonna steal the screen back from Lindsay and share our homepage. So whether I pull a book from a particular school or from our content, it works the same way. So let me go down here, and let's say I was teaching a class on trig. I can go to those FlexBooks. I can open up the trig concepts book. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the option to customize. So if I click customize on here, I can put CK12 concepts demo for math teachers. And now the quickest, easiest way, so that's part one, I just renamed that book. Done. Maybe you want to put your school name in there or something like that. I can say, great, but I don't teach polar system in here, so I'm going to actually remove that whole chapter and I can just exit out and it will go away. Now, if I realize actually next year I want to teach it, I can always go back to the CK12 trig book and add it back in as well. I could teach inverse trig functions before identities just by dragging that chapter up above the trig identities. Now, if I wanted to delete or reorder anything within a chapter, these little arrows just toggle down, and then I could do the same thing for any content within that particular area. If I wanted to add content, I can either do that by clicking on an add to content or add to FlexBook textbook on anywhere that I'm on the site, or by adding content this way. And I can, as you can see, search CK12 for content, write a new modality such as a new read or a new section within the book, add a new chapter if I want to add another bucket to put things in, or I can even upload via Word or Google. And here's a couple of notes just to get those out there. If you're uploading via a file, each Google Doc or Word file translates to a single section. So for example, 3.1. You can't upload your whole book like in one shot because then you wouldn't be able to mix and match it accordingly. This is also a great time to talk about best practices. So if you are editing and you want to add content when you're browsing on our site, make sure you're not in edit mode in your book. So anytime you're editing in the book, click save, put it aside, and then go explore. And as you work, you can kind of add to your FlexBook that way. But try not to have too many tabs and too many different things open, or you might end up saving an old revision and overwriting work that you've done. So just keep it ordered and clean. So this is a great strategy, just even the basics as you're working through here, and we're going to go into a particular section so you can see kind of what that editing looks like. But really deleting and reordering content. I know I never ever taught from the beginning to the end of a textbook when I taught pre-calculus. And so my students were always like, why am I lugging this book around? Which luckily they don't have to do when it's digital. But really there was all this other content that they had to kind of get through or skip, or, you know, I taught in one year, I taught trig before I taught exponential functions because they wanted a break. And here I can just reorder it and make it fit for my students. Another piece of that is that idea of rewriting, which is what we're going to go into kind of in advanced editing in a second. And I had a teacher who said they rewrote the sections of the book so that they fit the students' reading levels because she had a class that was struggling with reading. And then they found that they could read it. And she said she had students who were volunteering to read out loud in class that they might not have done before that. So great strategies for that. So let's say I'm going to go in here and we're going to do kind of the second part of this, which is that idea of advanced editing. So maybe an introduction to trig, we can open this up and we can talk about right triangles. So Pythagorean theorem in here. Now this gets us into our editor. Once again, you may use our content as is. None of this customization is required. So I'm just going to add a note because this demo, I've already worked on this read in a different situation. But you can use all of our content as is. You don't have to customize it. You don't have to change anything. But really, as Dan was saying, you can make it way more relevant for your students by fitting it to your scope and sequence of your class and adding examples that are related to that piece. So as you go through here, you can see kind of your basics. You'll see text. It's just like a normal text editor. You can see the, bold, italics, underline, all of those pieces for basic edits that you want to do here. I can type in new text. I can reformat pieces. And anywhere that you see something here, it's a multimedia piece. So if I actually click on that embedded object, you'll see that all I did was put in that YouTube embed code, and now I can see what's going to show up in there. So if it's in there, you can edit it, or you can add any embedded pieces by clicking on this Insert Edit Media option at the top. You can embed images this way as well. And then because you're all math teachers and you love formatted equations like this, you're going to want to know about our math tool. So if I clicked on an equation, it will pop up our math tool. Now, as it loads the math editor, you'll see this is in LaTeX formatting, but you do not need to know that. So we also have all these drop-down options. And I could just go in here, click enter, go to my math editor and write my own equations from scratch by simply choosing, okay, I want the square root of x, and then maybe times 2, and you can preview it and see what's happening there. And even put it kind of in line with your text, block math, or centered, or on the side. So we're not going to spend a ton of time going through all these different pieces. I'm happy to explore more if you have a specific question, but definitely feel free to explore that tool to edit the content within any particular read if you want to change the intro problem or if you want to do something like that. So 2 more strategies for you guys as you're teaching math. One is, as you can see in this particular read, I can put my own equations in, I can add images in, you could even put a link to one of the Plix or the Sims within here. And so you can kind of use this particular FlexBook structure to build your own playlist. And that's a great way to kind of incorporate all of these different modalities within a particular section. The other option that we've had students do is have students create their own FlexBook for a course. So you guys can work together as a class or individually, explore content on our site and say, okay, we're going to include that section here and this section here. Maybe have students make their own videos as we suggested before and incorporate those as you work your way through.
Yeah, like Katie just said, we have users come to us for all different reasons. If you are looking for a textbook replacement, it looks like we had a lot of kind of district administrators in this webinar, curriculum folks. If you are looking for CK12 FlexBooks to be a solution for your district to be a free customizable book, you can take one of our books as is, like Katie just said, or search for a school district near you, or you can go the extra layer and start editing the book and customizing for your individual needs. So districts we're visiting kind of do all different phases of this process. And as you get into it, we have a lot of information on our help desk. I don't know if you've shown them the help desk yet. Maybe while Katie's got her screen live here, can navigate that, show you this help option up at the top. Will take you to a pretty robust offering of support. So as you have questions about how to do anything that you've learned in this webinar, or if you're just wanting more general information, go to the Help Center, check that out. And then also we'll be blasting our email address out, but we have a support center, support@ck12.org. So as you get started, if you have any questions, or at the bottom it says, send us an email. We mean that. Ask us some questions and we'll help you with that process. So a couple things in Q&A from what you were just discussing, Katie. We have a question about the license, and do for-profit private schools still qualify under the CC by NC license?
That's actually a good question, and I don't think we've gotten that one before. So generally, the basic gist of it is that you're not supposed to be selling our content as we go through. I would ask you if you are, I'm assuming this is coming from a for-profit private school that's asking that, maybe just shoot us an email after and we can investigate that piece. You can also check out kind of at the bottom of our website our terms of use. So you'll see different pieces about us as you go kind of about, and then CK12 usage, you'll see kind of where we are. And I think they just moved our terms of use, so we can send that to you as well. But yeah, I would say check that license, check to see kind of how you're using it. If you're creating content and selling that content, then definitely not, because it's non-commercial use. For a for-profit school, I guess we would have to look into that for you.
Okay, Katie, this is another tricky one too. We have a question about our standards, and as standards are changing in different states and possibly, you know, across the country, do CK12's resources reflect the revision? Specifically, this question was coming from about the math 1 to 3 grades, the standards for North Carolina. I guess they've been revised in North Carolina and wondering how CK12 gets caught up on that.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, we continually try to update our content, but given that there are 50 states and 50 different sets of standards, depending on whether or not they're customizing for local areas or they're actually using, you know, the Common Core standards as we go, with that small team that Lindsay talked about, I know that we won't always be immediately updated to fit your particular state standards, and that's where we allow for this idea of customization. So, for example, Tullahoma, who you guys heard from, and El Paso, which I showed you, they said, you guys are great, you're 99% of the way there, and you know, we just changed our standards again this year, and so we're gonna modify your content to fit those standards. And so that's the difference between us and kind of a traditional publisher where they have a book and you're stuck with that. In our case, you're welcome to take our content and you guys can help us by staying abreast of your own standards and kind of customizing your content. And then maybe consider republishing it under that schools page so that other users in your state could have that same area and that same updated content.
Katie, what do you know about the integrated math FlexBooks for high school? Do you know if that's something that is being worked on?
So at this point in time, we've had a bunch of users do things, and let me just kind of keep this as a draft or finalized draft. Just know that anything you want users to see beyond yourself, you do need to finalize. So we're gonna let that work there, and maybe I'll just go back to a different page while that's saving. So this option to search, CK12 doesn't have a specific integrated book. You are welcome to, as we said, mix and match content. But I could go to search, and then I could go to different books, and then let's see what we have under community contributed for integrated. So you'll see an integrated science 8, integrated science here. A lot of these look like they're based on science, but that might be a great place to, let's see if we can filter for math as well. So maybe an algebra book. So integrated algebra 2. So that might be a great place for you guys to look. So one of the things is that as more and more users are kind of customizing content to fit integrated classes, to fit AP classes, to fit international baccalaureate classes, we don't necessarily have all of those books on our schedule to create. So I would definitely say check the community contributed tab, and you might find someone else that's already done that work for you, and then you can start from there and customize.
Okay, well, with that, why don't we continue on here to the next little section of the webinar. I'm going to take the screen back over, and we are going to move on to the topic of assignments.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. So for this last section, I want to briefly go through some tools for creating assignments. So I'm going to show you guys groups, adaptive practice and quizzes, and our tools and LMS integration. So there's a ton that you can do with this. And so we've done full webinars just on assignments and practice. So for more information about anything I mentioned, you're welcome to ask us questions here, stay on at the end and ask us questions, or check out that webinar that we did specifically on practice called All About CK12 Adaptive Practice. Or join us, because I'm sure we'll do more just specifically on practice. So this is your quick overview. We're starting with groups. Class groups have options to assign content, track progress, host discussions. We'll talk about adaptive practice versus quizzes that are your customized assignments, and then integration with different LMS systems. So as we go from there, I'm gonna jump back to live on our site. And let's go to our homepage. And so you'll see you can actually browse practice through this first part here. And let's say I went to probability. I could pick this first topic on theoretical and experimental probability and start practicing. Now, you might have actually, let's go back for 1 second. You might have noticed that it has at the bottom the different ways to learn. Those are your concept modalities. And then if I go into the practice, I can start answering questions. Let's say this. Next question, you might see a hint or a scratch pad to kind of write out options as you go through. And if I start messing up or just randomly guessing, you'll see the difference between some multiple choice, short answer, etc. It's gonna kind of bump me and suggest that maybe I check something out, that I read something, that I watch a video. And so here's the recommendations that it's showing me to help me with this particular concept. So our adaptive practice system, which is just this basic practice system, pulls from, there's about 100,000 math questions on our site, pulls from there and will offer up harder questions to students that are doing well or suggest recommendations like this for students that are struggling. So that's one option for our practice. You can also, if I return to this practice and I submit it, you can see this different area. So we're practicing, I can see my concepts, and I can actually review my answers. So all of this content that you're working with, as you go through, you can see easy, medium, hard. You can go through and see the questions that they worked with. At the top, it even has the correct options and the time spent. So a great strategy to work with is to help students kind of self-assess by looking at some of these practice reports and saying, okay, how much time did you spend? Were you really just guessing? Where were you having trouble? Did you actually use the recommended resources? Did you use the hints? In this case, you're struggling with the harder questions, but you got the easy question right, great, and kind of work your way through there. So that's an option for the assignment. At the top, you'll notice I can customize, and you can customize from here, or you can customize from the assignment page itself, and that will bump you to your quiz feature. And I'm not gonna go through this now, but basically you can pick and choose the questions that you want, you can see the questions in there, and you can set some options, whether you use it as a quiz or not.
Okay, so Katie, you just flew through that. And like she just said, we do run webinars that are all about assessments and practice and setting up quizzes or setting up classes and how all these pieces go together. And we spend about an hour talking through the nuts and bolts of that. So we wanted to make you aware that it's there. As I'm visiting teachers across the country, often they don't always know what we have in addition to the FlexBooks. And they're like, where are your questions? And so we have 150,000 some questions that are available for you guys to use, and you can use them in this adaptive practice format for students. Students can access it on an app. Or as a teacher, you can also create a quiz on the screen that Katie has up right now. You know, choose the number of questions, set up the number of attempts, set up the time limits. You can really control that quiz environment for the students. So we recommend that you explore it, you check it out, and then as you have questions, use the Help Center, look at one of our webinars, join an upcoming webinar to really learn the nitty-gritty parts of that whole system.
Lindsay, thanks for that recap. Yeah, as we said, we're kind of browsing through this super quick, but I want to also, in addition to our adaptive practice and quizzes, talk about assigning different pieces. So in kind of that arithmetic, if I'm in any particular Plix, for example, you saw the assign to class option at the top. You'll see that on reads, you'll see that on videos. So one option is to maybe flip your class, and you can assign a video. If I click this, it shows me my different groups, and I'll show you that in a second. I can put a due date and I can put information there. So have students check out a Plix or a video or read at home, and then come in and maybe work through some of those math problems in class. So if they're struggling, they have you as a resource for that piece. So let's talk about those groups because we just brought them up. You can create groups by going at the top of any of your pages. Yep, we're gonna leave out of that quiz because we're not gonna make any adjustments. And you can create a group. Now, if you have no groups, you'll see a slightly different screen, but the idea is that you really just want to create a class group And that will, let's say it's going to be for geometry. And this is a demo for math teachers. And now I can create this group. And once I'm in that group, I can then assign work to that group. My students can see it, and they can do practice on their phone. They can do practice on a computer. They can do practice kind of wherever they are. So two kind of strategies about practice that might be useful is you can use this to help students fill in holes in their learning, or you could use practice like a Plix tool and say, for the first 5 minutes of class, I want you to practice random questions on a particular concept. So those are kind of both great options as you work your way through. If I looked at reports, my reports would include the pieces that you have for kind of all of that detail that you saw when I was looking at the student report within that as a class as a whole. So that's kind of the broader, kind of highest level, 100,000 view of groups and assignments. But we also want to talk about kind of the tools that you could use. So if I go to CK12 and I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see this option for tools and apps. And that's a great resource just to see what's out there. And the first couple things are our FlexBook, Physics, and CK12 apps. And so the FlexBook app allows for offline use of our FlexBooks, which is great. So you can download CK12 books and then use them offline on a tablet or on a phone. Our simulations app is similar in that it allows for offline use of physics sims. And then the practice app allows students to do practice that you've assigned or just on their own, on their phone or a tablet as well. And so those are some great resources. Below that, as you scroll down, you'll see our integration with Google Classroom, Edmodo, Schoology, Canvas, Blackboard, Nearpod, etc. So if you are using any of those particular learning management systems, feel free to stay on and ask us questions about them. There's kind of different levels of integration based on the particular topic and the particular system. And so we're happy to go into any of those, or you can check out that adaptive practice app that we were talking about, adaptive practice webinar that we had just referenced as well.
Great. A couple of quick questions. Someone's asking about the quizzes and provides feedback of the student's performance. So just again, you want to quickly reference what kind of feedback they get?
Sure. If I go into that group, so let me go to my groups page and click on a group that actually has been created beforehand. So we'll go from here, and you can see under reports, the different assignments that I've created for this group, how students are working through them. If I click on any particular assignment, let's say this one, I could click on the assignment and see the percentage they've completed. I could click on the individual student or the percentage and see all of those details as you work your way through.
Okay, right now that's it for our Q&A. So if it's okay with everybody, I think I'm going to go through a little bit of a wrap up here about some reminders, and we're going to stay on after we do this wrap up to answer any individual questions you guys might have. If you had a burning question but didn't want to take up the time in the webinar, we're going to stay on and we're going to answer any of those for you. So the first thing that I want to make sure you're aware of, if I can share my screen back here. We've referenced several times more webinars that are coming up, as well as our archived webinars. So you can go to the CK12.org webinars page at any time. A lot of you learned about this because we blast out emails to our users to let you know about it, but you might tell your coworkers about the science one that's coming up. We have an hour-long session on simulations and Plix if you wanted more information about how those might apply to your math classes. And then everything CK12 is part of our ongoing series that we run about once a month. That's kind of a catch-all of everything you ever needed to know, which you guys are pros now, I know, so it might not, you might be more interested in the specific webinars instead. On the same webinar page, you'll see an archive for all of our previous webinars that you can watch on demand at home. I also want to let you know about CK12 Jumpstart program. This is a program that we ran this past summer for 6 weeks, and we went really in depth week by week about different components of CK12, and that page is still up and live and accessible for you. So you might go to the CK12 Jumpstart page and check out resources there. And then we're going to be emailing you and letting you know what we have going on for this summer sometime in the next month or so. We also have a CK12 cafe, which is a great place for students and for our adult users to have conversations. Specifically, I'd refer you to the Jumpstart for Educators Cafe. From our homepage, you can click on Cafe to access our various forums. And if you wanted to join the Jumpstart for Educators, that's a great place to start a conversation. And then we're also starting some state-specific educator groups. Right now, we've got Tennessee, we've got Texas, we've got Idaho, we've got a bunch of different ones up and running for you to work with people across your district and state. We love getting feedback on these webinars. We've created a really short survey that just has some quick questions for you about how we did today, if we met your needs, and what we could do better on future webinars. So this is going to be sent to you in a follow-up email. This is also going to be sent to you in the chat window. And so if you could take just a few minutes to fill that out, we would be forever grateful. Also in the follow-up email tomorrow, a lot of people were asking about those strategies that have been in the chat window throughout today's presentation, and those will be in a follow-up email for you. So that just leaves us to say thank you for joining us, and you are supported by our team here. So support at CK12.org gets answered by a live person who just wants for you to be successful. So please use that as you need to. Don't forget to let your social networks know about CK12 and your participation in our webinars. You can find us at CK12 Foundation and hashtag CK12. And so at this time, feel free to sign off if you've learned everything you need to know, and we're going to stay on, and I'm going to kick it back over to Katie to start doing a roundup of the remaining questions. So here you go, Katie.
Thanks, Lindsay. So I think right now we have answered the questions that are in there, but we'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of post any last questions before we sign off. So feel free, let me share my screen. We'll go back to live so that I can demo as we go through. But yeah, feel free to post in the Q&A. It looked like there was one question in chat, so maybe I can answer that. So what does skill level and quizzes results represent, and how does it help to identify gaps on the topic or limitations of the student? So the skill level is actually that meter that you guys saw as I was working my way through, as it got kind of down further and further. So in this case, they were doing really well when they finished. So this skill level was, as they worked their way through, they were kind of building up and getting a streak of good questions. In terms of the other materials, that's more just kind of a progress bar, almost like a fuel gauge. Like, are you doing poorly and need to refuel and check some stuff, or are you doing well and it'll keep bumping you up? The other pieces of that report, I think, are more important to talk about, places that students are missing. Are they getting streaks right, or are they just kind of doing so many that they got enough right in the long run? How much time did they spend? And then this easy, medium, hard is a great way to say, okay, well, maybe you're getting all the ones that are super straightforward and you're struggling with the harder ones. And then if you go in and you look at the questions themselves, you can start seeing, okay, well, if you got this one wrong, how is that different than some of the other questions that you got right, and kind of use that to assess. We have one question in here. If you're typing in questions, I encourage you guys to use the Q&A window, but it looks like we got another one in chat that says, is the progress of students reflected in real time? If you noticed when I was doing work within here, I actually had to click on, so let me just click on this preview so you can kind of see what the practice looks like for another one. In the top right, there's this option to submit. So don't let a student just kind of work on their stuff and then close their window and go back, because it will take a while for the system to update. It might not have caught the last question that they completed in there. So make sure that when your students are done answering their questions, they click submit, and then that will bump over and you'll be able to see that progress in your teacher account if you've assigned that particular concept to your students.
You did have a request to talk quickly about Google Classroom integration.
Sure, I can do that. So as you go through, let's go to just a different page. So on any of our sites, our site, any of our pages, if I'm in a particular concept, so let's say I'm in algebra, studying linear equations, and I click on Share Me, you'll see the option to share via Google Classroom. And what that will allow you to do is you can pick a class that you have. So in this case, let's say Jumpstart, and then I can post that as an assignment, a question, or an announcement. So one thing you should know is that our Google Classroom, when we first integrated, did not have the option to pass back grades at that time. And so unlike Canvas and Schoology, that if students do work on our site, those reports will show up in there. Google Classroom hadn't developed that when we did our integration, so that is forthcoming, but it's not happening at this point in time right now. So you won't, if you want an assignment for your class in Google Classroom, you will also need to assign it within a CK12 group to see that report. And that's just based on the timeline of integration that we worked off of. So we'll give you guys another minute maybe to kind of post any last questions that you have. And otherwise, we will sign off and follow up from there. So it looks like we have another question about students doing work in their phone. So the physics and FlexBook apps are designed to allow for offline use. Because the practice system is adaptive, students do need to be online in order to use that practice app. So that would work the same way it would work if they were on a computer for that particular piece. So if they've downloaded the account, it's really just for ease of access of answering on their phone and using that as their device, not for offline use for the practice. Okay, I think with that, maybe we'll wrap up for today. We'll post this webinar on our webinars page so you guys can reference it in the future. And you're welcome to email us with questions, email support with questions, join us for an upcoming webinar. And yeah, just let us know how things are going. We always love to hear experience stories. Thanks so much.